I'm here today, as you all know, to speak about the 5 factors I believe affect general human well-being. Now, what is well-being? What is human well-being? It's a combination of both objective and subjective factors. The objective factors being your mental and physical health, among other factors. So let's jump straight into the 5 factors. Factor number 1, sleep. Sleep is very important to the state of our well-being because there's empirical evidence that suggests that sleep can affect our cognition and our decision-making, which in turn can affect our general well-being and the well-being of the people around us. In one such study, there were 3 groups of participants. The first group were allowed only 4 hours of sleep a day. The second group, 6 hours of sleep a day. And the third group, 8 hours of sleep a day. On checking back to these participants after 2 weeks of their allocated sleeping times, it was found that the group with 4 hours and 6 hours of sleep suffered maximum a huge number of attention lapses, a decrease in cognitive brain function, and generally an increase in cognitive issues. They had problems concentrating, and their reaction time was similar to a person with a blood alcohol concentration of 0.1%. This, in America, is considered drunk. So what can we do to increase the quality of our sleep? Before I get to this, of course, I must mention the 8 hours. The group that had 8 hours of sleep. The group that had 8 hours of sleep had minimal attention lapses, and their cognitive brain function appeared normal. But something interesting that was found was that the group that had, another group that had over 9 hours of sleep, that is too much sleep, and a group that had too little sleep, both suffered similar difficulties. Similar difficulties physiologically, similar difficulties in terms of their decision-making. It was found that people who slept too much or too little were more likely to be susceptible to an increase in risk of mortality by 12% and by 30% in other cases. They were also more likely to suffer from cardiac arrest, diabetes, and generally worse decision-making. We increase the quality of our sleep in many ways, one of them being exercising. Another way being establishing a sleeping pattern that is recognizable, that we can adapt to after constant conditioning. Our body gets used to sleeping patterns that we create for ourselves. The physiological changes then occur and manifest themselves, and we can then adapt. Factor number 2, stress. Another factor that is very important to the general human well-being of the people around us and ourselves. In prehistorical times, when it's believed that we were evolving, when there was a perceived threat, such as a saber-toothed tiger or a bear approaching us or a lion, we'd release stress hormones that, from an evolutionary perspective, are beneficial because we can escape tight situations, such as a perceived threat. When we see this, the hormonal response, the physiological response, unfortunately, are the exact same as perceived threats in the modern world. For example, when you can't pay your mortgage, when you're late for an interview, the physiological responses are the exact same. So we end up releasing stress hormones such as cortisol. Cortisol affects our memory. That's why when you're stressed out about an exam, you can't really remember the things that you revised for. Cortisol has also been found to decrease the body's ability to regulate the heartbeats. Cortisol also suppresses the immune system. In suppressing the immune system, it makes us more susceptible to diseases. How do we avoid stress? There's very many ways to avoid stress, but one of the ways that I find from my subjective experience of the world, to avoid stress is to try something new, learn something different, learn something about your partner, learn something about your family. Avoid compensatory narcissists. These are people who try to bring you down for the sake of their own pleasure. They don't feel good about themselves, so they try to put you down. And when we increase our stress levels, we become more irrational and make worse decisions. This leads me to my third factor, the extent to which irrational ideas affect our daily lives. As human beings, we're very susceptible to making irrational decisions. That's why the big corporations of this world invest hundreds of millions of dollars into research and development so as to better their advertisement to woo consumers into buying products that they wouldn't otherwise buy. One such study gave a food for thought, whereby today you're offered $100, and tomorrow we offer you $105. It would be more rational to take the option whereby I wait 24 hours and get $105. But instead, being the human beings that we are, we're more likely to accept $100 today. Why does this happen? It's because of the proportions. $5 in proportion to $100 is so small, according to the rules of proportion, that we'd rather accept the $100 today. Factor number 4, our interpersonal relationships. In order to develop these great civilizations and very complex societies and profound philosophy, we have to be able to collaborate and to cooperate with the people around us, because we human beings are social mammals. We are social creatures. Therefore, developing interpersonal relationships and recognizing that we are all innately different because of the difference in our psyches. We all have different cognition processes, and we all have different personalities. We all work in different ways, and of course, evolution would help us pan out in this way, because we must have different sorts of humans in society in order to be able to survive. Factor number 4, self-knowledge and meditation. Meditation has a lot of scientific and empirical data that backs it up. For example, they examined the brains of Buddhist monks to new meditators, and it was found that their brains released more alpha waves. And because their brains released more alpha waves, the regions of their brains that were active, that lit up, dealt with decreased anxiety, decreased stress, and increased tolerance. Meditation increases the gray matter in our brain, which improves memory, learning, judgment, our general mood. And when we spend time for general contemplation and internal self-reflection, we develop a sort of knowledge of the self. And this only happens when we transcend into higher states of consciousness, whereby our sole purpose is not for our survival or our own narrowly defined success, rather transcendent experiences that can't be explained, or we allow our minds to wander off unrestricted. Knowledge of the self and meditation is therefore very important in determining our state of well-being. Thank you very much.